What's going on? Welcome to AngularAir. I'm your host, Justin Schwarzenberger, and we're back at it again with another episode. Today, we're going to be learning about what's new in AngularFire. So some little Angular, a little bit of Firebase. It can be pretty exciting. Let's say hi to our panelists, and then we'll meet our guest, and then we'll get into the content. Joining us today, we've got Bonnie with us. Bonnie, what's going on?
Hey, how are you doing? I'm very excited to be here and always excited about this topic. It's like old
Awesome.
school. This is one of my first. This is like the first thing that was really easy for me when I started using Angular. The docs have always been so great, and I can't wait to see what they're up to.
I know. It's been a minute. We had a talk before about AngularFire, but it seems like a long time ago. So can't wait to see what's new, for sure. Alyssa's joining us. Alyssa, what's going on?
So excited to be here.
Everybody's excited. All right, Mike's with us as well. I hope Mike is excited as well because we need 3 for 3 here.
I'm definitely excited. Always nice to hear wonderful things from David East.
Mike's
Awesome.
prepared.
I spoiled. My bad.
I know.
But you
It
can
wasn't
read it.
me.
You
It
can
wasn't
read
me
it.
or Bonnie.
either
It
this
wasn't me or
time.
Bonnie.
It's on the screen. I'm just reading.
We were so well prepared. I know, but you're supposed to but Justin's very patient with us, luckily.
Well, that worked out great because he was the last panelist. So now, but now you've got the responsibility of introducing our guest. So go for it,
The
Mike.
last panelist is allowed.
Our wonderful guest today comes to us from Google directly, from the Firebase team, Mr. David East.
Hello, thank you all for having me.
Thanks for coming back. Appreciate it. Always
It's been a
great to have
while.
you on.
We were all really excited. We have a squad channel, and we were like all going crazy in the squad channel. David East, yay! We were excited to have you.
Actually, one of my favorite, doing like a podcast live streaming moments was the first time I did AngularAir. I don't know if you remember it, Schwarty. It was you and Jeff Welpley. And then I was like, I'm going to do some live coding. And I was very unprepared for it. And like right as I went into, my wife was like texting me and she was like, the sprinklers are going off in the apartment and there's like, it's not actually a fire though. And both my kids were really little then. And she was like, I don't know what to do. And I was like, I'm about to go into a live stream. And so I texted her back and I was like, hey, just come to the office and then I'll come get you after the live stream. And I was like, oh, 1 second. And so I hop in and then I was trying to show how you do like operators with like AngularFire. And I remember just like completely like not getting it. And then I was like, it turned in from like, this is what you can do with AngularFire into this is how you debug operators. And then everyone was like, is he going to get it? And then I like got it at the very end. And I was like,
And it's not like you had nothing else going on with your brain. That's horrible.
Right. I was like underneath the table and I was like, so then I think you filter. And then I was like, are you here? And then you map that. And is it switch map or is it switch scan merge zip map? I'm like,
my gosh. I am
It's
so
so
proud of you
endearing,
for
though.
juggling that.
But being able to look back on it now, though, it can only go up from there, right?
it's still on the YouTube. It's just so funny. I can go back and look at it.
What happened with your house? Was everything drenched?
So it wasn't that bad. They did so pretty much like where I lived in San Francisco at the time. You would always get these you get these interns that would come in, work at the big tech companies. And every time it was intern season, this would happen because they would do this thing where they'd like burn something in the oven and they didn't know that the last thing you want to do in a big apartment complex like that is open the front door, because if you open, it's just like it's natural instinct. But so you get like this huge flux of people all at once, and then almost like once per week it would happen. And so someone opens the front door, and all the smoke goes out to the front door, and the apartment complex therefore thinks it's a real fire because it's like a bunch of smoke going into the hallway. So what you're supposed to do is you open up your windows. And so it wasn't like a real fire. It was just like someone burning like something in an oven or toast. I don't know.
So now you just like keep everything in waterproof sealed bags, like in case. That's so
Yeah, so it wasn't too bad. I think like the sprinkler only goes off in like a certain part, and I don't know. It was a long time ago. That was like 3 years ago.
Oh my gosh! Well, I am still impressed with you for juggling that and doing the stream. So
I have
glad
to
to
say,
be back.
watching you struggle though, David. I mean, it reminds me. You know, my favorite David East story, right? Is when I really became a big David East fan was the when you were tweeting falling off your skateboard over and over and over again and learning how to do the jump flip. Because that's the thing is when people watch you live coding and you're, you know, breaking it and messing it up and working through, I mean, it's so endearing because we all go through that. And I love to watch it.
It was interesting.
And of course you do get it working in the end.
Oh yeah, it was interesting. A lot of people would look at me skateboarding and they'd be like, "That's how I feel as a developer."
Yes.
And I thought that was always really interesting.
Because you're David East and we know your name. We've all known your name for years, right? And so to see you falling and to see like you didn't just wake up that cool. I mean, it seems like that at first, but then when you see the process of what it took to get there, like, hey, I didn't start out that cool, and it's so encouraging, and I just think it's really heartwarming.
All I had to do was go to the skate park, and then you were like, especially in San Francisco, you go to the skate park there, and you're like, I'm very bad at this. You're like, I spent like an hour trying to do one thing at the skate park, and then after I finished, the guy comes up from behind me first try, just like nails it, and like the first bit of his line, you're like,
yeah, you like slowly back away. You like hide your skateboard behind your back. I'm just here to watch.
Hey, that applies to a lot of different things. That you see somebody who can do more than you, and it just encourages you to try and do more and learn more.
Yeah, or to back away slowly. I mean, either reaction is valid.
Well, that's why I like the process. That's why I like seeing him like falling down over and over and over again. And then at the very end of the GIF, you see, oh, there he did it right, and now he's all cool. But I love the learning process.
Yeah, pretty much trial and error.
So hey, while we're on that learning process, but before we get to the AngularFire stuff, since David, you're so good at publicly exposing stuff as you're learning through it and endearing all of us to your journey, right? I know you've done a couple other things recently, like with drawing, doing some drawings, as well as you're venturing into doing some streaming now, right?
Yeah, no, I was hoping no one would bring up the drawing. So I think you're the first person too since I stopped doing it, and I was like, "That's good. No one's noticed it. This is good."
I know, but I'm really sorry, David. Because now that he brought it up, I want to see the drawing. I mean, how can we not?
Drawing is so hard.
Can you explain? I'm super confused. Did you like pick up a new hobby of drawing?
I did, and so I went and I wanted to learn how to draw. Because as a web developer, I always think that there's like these different, like web development is just like a Venn diagram of like many skills, just like, you know, like most things in life. And one of the things that I always really respected about really well-built websites wasn't just so that they were designed very well. And like design something as like in web development, you pick up a lot of things as time moves on. And then you can also like really dive deep into that. And a lot of it makes sense. Because you're like, oh, I know how to make this, and now I'm learning how to make this like, you know, look a little better, act a little better. But then with what I also noticed is that illustration is such a massive part of web development that I've not always thought about. We're always like, oh, let's just get someone that can draw. And I always thought like, oh, it'd be really cool if I could draw the things that I would put on my sites or like on design a site. And so I wanted to go and learn how to draw. And it is seriously one of the hardest things I ever attempted to do. And so I challenged myself. I said for 30 days, I was going to do a new drawing every day, which was a complete and utter mistake. And I did it for like 19. And then I slowly backed away because I was like, this is so tough. Because it's one thing to do like a sketch every day for 30 days, which is what I should have said. But I tried to get like a completed drawing.
Oh my gosh.
It would take like 2 to 8 hours a day, like,
oh my gosh,
to finish. And like, it was really, really, really difficult.
The trick is to keep it really simple, David. You have to like just get something you can just do really fast.
I think the best one I did, or this one I'm most proud of. Let me see if I can
You both are drawing on an iPad or something and not on paper.
Yeah, it is. iPads are like the iPad Pros are really nice for any type Wacom tablet, iPad Pro, doesn't really matter. They're
Oh my
really,
god, the Lego guy! Wait,
because
oh wait, is that
they're-
your background?
yes. So I
love
drew
it.
this. Oh no, that's an image. That's the camera. So I drew this, and I was so proud of that.
Yes.
That's
was
pretty
like
amazing.
I love
Hours of
it.
just shading, I'm just like, and then they're like, "What are you doing?" And you're like, "Something very important." Okay. And you're just like,
Alyssa, the iPad. Well, we need to talk about AngularFire, but
I,
we'll talk
sometime.
about that. The cool thing about the iPad is that it has a pencil now, and it's like really.
Oh,
pretty.
I know,
It's-
Bonnie. I know about the pencil. I don't have one. Some of us aren't as elite, but I know the pencil. Okay, Bonnie. Justin's left. Is he going to get his pencil to show off too? Justin! I'm leaving.
Nice.
I'm leaving
Okay,
you
you
all
guys,
right
I'll
let's
now.
talk
digitally
about
hand you
AngularFire,
my
come
pencil.
on.
You can have it.
It's it's
all I
really
needed
nice
back.
to have no fear of messing up on your line, because I started with paper and it was just like different sketch after different sketch, because you're like, I just
Right.
messed up that line. And then
Right.
when you're first starting, you want to do it so well that you can't see the larger picture. It's like if you were like, every line of code needs to be perfect, and like, you know,
Yeah.
now we're like, you're like / to do fix that hack later, and you like move on. But when you're drawing, you don't think that way. Like when you're learning, you're like, you know, especially if you're a junior dev, you're like, I can't write a hack. What if this goes to code review and everyone judges me and thinks horribly of this? And like, you know, I've had code reviews where it's like, to do, you know, like, fix this later, please, to code reviewer, just let this pass right now. Like, but I would never would have done that as a junior dev. I would have spent hours just making sure it was like idiomatic or like
Mhm.
was up to code, basically.
Well, that's certainly why we all enjoy learning from you, is your ability to deliver that content and to connect with us as we go through that same journey of the stuff that we're going through, which is, wow, this is challenging, or how do we adapt, or what if we make mistakes, or what if it's challenging, right? And you do such a great job at that. So we're definitely
Well, thank
excited to learn AngularFire from you and what's new in
And
that.
I wanted to give you a shout out for your talk at NGConf last week.
Oh, thank you.
NGConf Hardwired. You had me rolling. Like, it was so funny. Like, and the content was great. So thanks for that informative and highly entertaining talk. Check it out. The talks will be up. I don't know when, but soon. So you can sign in even if you don't have a ticket and watch them from NGConf. But seriously, check out David's talk because it was like on fire.
To provide context to any of the panel who didn't see it, or any of the audience, I did a talk on AngularFire, but I had this idea where like this actually came together really quick because you know, due to the world we lived in, I had pretty much been out of doing anything for NGConf for like for 3 weeks before. They were like, okay, actually, can you do this live thing? And then I was like, oh no, I can't do anything live that quickly. And I just didn't, I need like interaction, or I need it to be really well like planned. So I was like, I don't think I'm going to do really well in this pre-record or in this like live staring at my, you know, screen environment. So I was like, can I give you a pre-recorded video? And they were like, yeah, sure, whatever. Just yeah, that's fine. And so I had this whole idea of like, just, you know, a lot of people are at home right now and they're adjusting to this crazy life. Like their whole families are at home and they're being their kids like teachers and everything. And just very like, it's not regular work from home in any sense of the mean. And so I had this whole setup where my kids were coming in from behind me, like the guy from CNN, and like kept messing with me and like asking me stuff. And I was taking like these YouTube jump cuts, being like, 1 second. And so it was just, I thought of that idea and I was like, oh, now I have to totally do this video, because I just feel like everyone just watching that would be like, yes, this is my life right now.
No, it was wonderful. And even how you ended it, he was like, so this has been the best 20-minute Angular and Firebase video that you'll ever see today on this time slot. And then it was just like you kept going. It was so funny. But no, I love your personality, and it came off really well. So
thank you. Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun making the video, and I'd never done a video like that before. So I think it was kind of like that uncharted territory, like vibe where you're like, oh, I've never done this. You go through that bit of like, this idea, it's going to be amazing. Then you start doing it. And then you're like, this is going to be less amazing than I thought. And then you really start doing it, like recording it. And you're like, this is probably going to be pretty bad. And then you start like, then you kind of tilt up and you're like, wait, actually, as it comes together, you're like, this is getting pretty good. Okay. All right. Okay. And then you're like right back to where you were at the beginning.
By the end of it, you release it and you're like, is this horrible or wonderful? Like,
I actually I had to send it. I sent it out to a lot of people beforehand. I like uploaded it to like, as like a private video on a YouTube channel. And I was like, please tell me if this is horrible. I was like, I don't know what I think about this. I've never done it before. And everyone was like, no, I get it.
Oh my goodness. So tell us, we are doing AngularFire today. And also, can you, before you start, tell us about, I know there's Firebase and I know there's AngularFire for Angular projects using Firebase ? Like, can you clarify on terminology so that I don't make mistakes anymore?
So if you're using Angular in Firebase, there's very, very little reason for you not to be using AngularFire, which is the library that integrates, even though it's AngularFire, it should almost really be called like ArcJS Fire with a bit of Angular conveniences in there, because like the Angular parts that we integrate with, they're very important because you wouldn't want to do them yourself, especially every time for every project, because they're tedious and kind of just like, but it's mostly RX like integration. And so Firebase, for the uninitiated, is a backend as a service platform. And so you get a database, auth system, hosting, and then we have also these like growth and stability products, we call them. So like growth being like, how do I measure conversions, and how do I track how successful things are going, and how do I change like features out on the fly and stuff like that. So we have lots of different products that do that. And then we also, for stability, we do things like performance monitoring that will tell you like what a lot of really important page load metrics and any like custom metrics that are important to your app as well. So it's a really good way of seeing your app's performance over time. So if you like publish a change and it's like, oh, we just push this new feature out and it really sunk our page load because of, you can see lots of information to pull that out. So it's this big, hosted suite of tools to, just make app development a lot faster and just easier. And that's always been,
I remember when I was first learning RxJS and I was very, very, very confused and I could not get RxJS working off my own server. I got it working on Firebase much before I got it working on myself. And then and it helped me actually really, when I was first learning, it helped me understand RxJS so I could see the live updates. It helped me a lot.
Yeah, no, it's that's something that a lot of people have done actually, is they've learned RxJS through using AngularFire or just RxJS and Firebase, because of the eventually you get kind of tired of like doing like a set interval to observable and trying to like, because that's really where RxJS like shines, is when you get those consistent updates and then you're trying to use the different type of creators like combine latest or trying to use really more advanced operators like with latest from and stuff like that. And so to really see those work and for that to click in your head, you need this stream of data and you need to pull it in from multiple sources. And with Firebase, that's just everything, all the databases and a lot of those servers, they all provide these like real-time streams. And so that's a really nice fit with RX, but just by a nice like happy bonus is that it's also a really good way to really flex the muscles of RX and kind of grow your understanding of it.
And and you can just pull up the Firebase console and then you see your app and it's like you have them both side by side, and it was so fast. I remember when I was first learning that, it was just like, oh yeah, that's how it works. I was getting very excited. It seems like a long time ago now, but I remember that was a joyful day.
Yeah, I don't think I would have quite the understanding of RxJS. I mean, it wasn't for building now multiple libraries with Firebase with it, but like, but just being able to see that fit. Because sometimes, like, if you're just doing like a take one of something, it's like, you're like, okay, that's kind of cool. I got this really cool control flow over it. Like I mapped and then I plucked and then I filtered and then I took one, and you're like, And that's like, you could have, .bend and done that inside of that as well. But RX is, makes it a lot more declarative. But what I think though, that like, anytime that you end up taking one or firsting the stream, it really, or only one value ever comes out of that stream, it really does, especially if you're new to RxJS, you're kind of like, how is this any different than like a callback or a promise at this point? Or
if you're new to Firebase, because I'm not a patient person. And when I first came into Firebase, it was like, you have a very limited amount of time to catch my attention, and it was just so like quick, like you set up your little account and then you click. It was just very fast, seamless.
Yeah, I mean,
okay, but what have you done for us lately, David East?
What have you done for us lately? So we
rude.
Two biggest things that we have done. The first is we had two services that were primarily on native only, so Android and iOS apps, and then we have brought them to the web. And so one of them is called Remote Config, which is a very it's a funny service or product to tell web developers about, because for like native app developers, like they get the need for this immediately. It's immensely important. So like if you're making an Android and iOS app and you find an error, or you need to release a new feature at a certain date, or like, you just want to change a message or something out on the fly, you really don't want to have to be like, oh, let's submit an app store review to get this back in. So now every change shouldn't if every change you make has to go through App Store, it's going to be really slow, really painful, and you're not going to be able to time things correctly. And so remote config allows you to create parameters. And then so a parameter can be as simple as just like a primitive value, like an integer, Boolean, string, or you can use JSON as well. And so you can just say like enable new like admin feature or something like that. And it's just a Boolean. And then you can create these conditions on top of the parameters of when that shows on the client. So you can tie that into like a certain date and time. So you could be like show flash sale banner. And then it could be from, this date to that date. And then that way the UI will, at that, whenever the user goes to the client and as your app at that date and time, it'll just enable like the banner. And so it's like, oh, like this is for sale. And then once that time's up, it goes away. And so it's really nice because you also don't have to like roll out a feature and then roll it back out, or, worry about the management of that.
I was going to ask, so you can change some of those options and like turn flags on and off in Firebase without redeploying your app. Oh,
yes,
that's cool.
Yeah.
And is that something that we would use for like, as well as like A/B testing?
Yes.
Or is there? Okay.
We have full A/B testing support for native, where you can actually see the results of things. We do not currently have that for the web. Something really want to do, but since the web one is new and our web one's still in beta, so we're like catching things up.
It's just job security, man.
Job security.
Can we mention really quick maybe what A/B testing is, that concept?
Yeah, this is great.
In case they don't know.
Yeah, like the easiest way to describe it, like a very simple one, is actually a real use case. Is in the early days of Firebase, back before it was at Google and it was a startup. I worked during then. Or I was on the team during then, we were trying to optimize our homepage to like increase conversion. And so we'd get all these people would come into Firebase.com, was the site back then. And now I think that just redirects you to Firebase.google.com. But so at Firebase.com, we would have this, we have this whole setup, and all we wanted to do is just get people to click this button to like sign up. And there was just this big debate over what the text should have been on that button. And all these people had these different theories about what it should be. So someone was like, oh, it should be get started. And someone's like, no, it should be get hacking. And they're like, and it was just, it sounds very pedantic, but when you think about it, like if this is literally getting someone to log into your app or maybe upgrade their plan or create a paid plan to begin with, the point becomes a lot more important. Even though you think the text isn't that important or the color of the button isn't that important, it really is. These small details do sometimes push like those like really push the bottom line. So A/B testing is a way to really solve that problem, or to solve it in a more scientific method. So it's sort of like if you were a scientist, you would be like, you would follow the scientific method of proving that, you know, this text or this color works better. And that way you would say like, I have a hypothesis. I believe that get hacking is a better text than get started. So the only way to do that is to test it. So A/B testing is, you'd say you have A and you have B. So A is get started, B is get hacking. And so you would then roll out 2 versions of that. There's multiple ways of doing that. That could be a change on the client, could even be a change on the server, but you serve up those 2 different forms of text to users. It's sort of like you partition your user
and
base.
They have services that do that make that super easy too.
Yes, and that is a whole other. That's how when these services get really powerful.
When
like
you say they, who's they?
They, like Firebase is one of the theys.
I thought it was like a big ambiguous they.
So with Firebase, you would use remote config to set the parameters, like I was talking about. So like, you know, button text, and then or sign up button text or something like that. And then the condition is then the value of that. So whether get hacking or get started. And so you would say for this audience of users, they will see get started. For this audience of users, they will see get hacking. And how you decide who sees what is up to you. So in our case, like if you want, you can actually hook it into Google Analytics. And so you could say like, oh, people in this area, or people who have these specific user properties and stuff like that, or someone in this audience I've created, which now I'm getting really deep into things. But so that's like a very powerful way.
Because I didn't even know that Firebase offered that. Last time I did A/B testing, we had to have another service for that. So
is all of this underneath remote config in the Firebase docs? Like if you wanted to dig into this? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you kind of skip back and forth between that and Google Analytics because they go hand in hand. You can use remote config purely without Google Analytics as well. It has its own way, its own independent way of doing what we call targeting. But if you're a Google Analytics user, especially a super one, you're going to be able to do some really specific things. But a really great kind of just traditional way of doing A/B testing is, you know, you could do it by location or by properties or whatever, but you also could just be like 20% of users see get hacking and 80% see get started. So we're just going to roll it out, and not even 20. Usually you do it much smaller. You'd be like 5%. And then you would want to see what are the results, what's the conversion results of those 5% versus the 95% who see the normal one of get started. And that's just like a random percentage that whether that person rolls into it or not. That's something you don't need Google Analytics at all for. And then that way you start measuring that and you say like, oh, I noticed that the people in the get hacking group are converting at like a 33% rate and get started is 15. So that's more than, you know, that's a really great, increase in conversion, but that's only 5% of total visitors. So let's now go from 5% to 10%, and let's see if those numbers hold. And then, 10 to 20 to 30. And then eventually you're just like, it's just called get hacking. Or you could see it as a certain point where you're like, oh yeah, get hacking really started to fail once we got to 40% of the users. It actually dipped below because that's how statistics work, is that when you have, when the sample size is not representative, then all of a sudden, things can look really great or look really bad, either or, but they don't accurately reflect things. So that's sort of the magic of A/B testing, though.
Yeah. So there's two sides of that. There's the configuration of who gets to see what, and then there's the other side of it, the after effect, to be able to view and query those results, the conversion rates.
Exactly.
What's that?
I said, yeah, totally. Yeah.
Does Firebase provide tooling on both sides, both the configuration as you went over, but also the review and the analytics afterwards? So
for native apps, you get both right now, but for web apps, you get just the configuration. And but there's still a lot of there's a lot you can measure though on your own with that. Like setting up your own little mini A/B testing is actually fairly easy, especially if you use one of our databases to store the data, and you can actually see these things pretty easily. And also you can still, even if you're not going to use the database, you can log these events in Google Analytics. So whether someone converted or not, and you can see whether they were in A or B. And then in Google Analytics, you can export all your data to BigQuery. And then with BigQuery, you can literally do anything.
If you know how.
It's an insanely powerful tool. And so, yeah, you can slice and dice your data. And so there's still we don't have any like slick UI for web developers for that, but but you're still like, you can still write a BigQuery query and get all that information.
And so then AngularFire provides us that connection to do the config?
Yes. So AngularFire, those are the two biggest things we've added lately. I guess those are the two like most obvious features. A couple other things we did too. But so we added a remote config service. So you can just, and that also allows you to say like, okay, let me get this parameter and I can actually subscribe to the changes of it because things can be like kind of piped in. We allow you to say like, okay, let's, so you can get the configuration and then adjust your UI accordingly or features accordingly. And then we also provide a Google Analytics service. And so the way that works is you include this service, this module, and then this, what we call a screen tracking provider. And what that does is it detects it detects whether you're using the router. And if you're using the router, it logs each routing event to Google Analytics as if it was not a single page app, as if it was like a traditional static app. And so when you get into Google Analytics and you see your data, it's just automatically set up because Google Analytics traditionally is built for, single route applications or like, server-backed applications. And so you have to do a lot of this yourself where you integrate with the router and detect when a route change has happened and then log that to Google Analytics. We just handle all that for you.
That's a nice integration. And so then I'm assuming it's just kind of bring that in, do a little bit of configuration, and then it's up and running.
Yeah. You just configure all that and what your app module, whatever NG module, you need it at whatever level. And usually which one is the root router one, you would just put in the AngularFire analytics module and then put the screen tracking service as the provider. And so that allows you to really just like get out of the box, just very traditional looking Google Analytics. And then we also have this ability to log these custom events. So you can say whether like, oh, someone did convert or it's just a method on the AngularFire analytics service where you just call .log event. And then that sends it right in with any, data you want to, also any dimensions as they call it to send it up with. And then when it gets, so if someone says log event conversion, and then you could say like group A or group B or even just like button text was get hacking. And then up in the dashboard, you can start looking and drilling into that data.
Nice. Now AngularFire does the auth part as well, integration? Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's probably been there for a while, right?
Yeah, that's been there for a very, very long time. Yeah, so ever since AngularFire for AngularJS. So yeah, basically OAuth is hard and maintaining multiple auth providers is also very difficult too. Like what if you have a user who comes to your app and they sign in with Twitter and then, they come in on another device and then they sign in with Google. How do you reckon now and then, all the data, those are effectively two different users if you just kind of set up two OAuth providers. And so then they're looking for like all their to-dos in their to-do app. And they're like, what is this? I already created this app and now none of my data is here because they didn't realize they've basically created two accounts. And so that's a really tricky problem. And we do our best. It's still very hard to like be foolproof on that. But we do our best to mitigate those problems. So like if someone logs in with Twitter and they have an email of like, david@david.com, and then they try to log in with Twitter, and then their Twitter email is also like david@david.com. We will detect that, and then we will like kind of behind the scenes. There's these like events you can listen to in the Firebase Auth SDK where we're like, hey, this user actually has an email over here. We can actually take a moment here to link the users if you want, and then you just call this other method, and it just kind of links them together. And so now when they log in as either or, it just brings them to the same user. And so you get the same user ID, which is the important part because you'll save that as sort of like your reference key in the database to figure out like, oh, let me get all the users to-dos of this UID. And then that's also very important to secure it because that user ID in itself, it's not some like encrypted thing or, you know, something where it exposes like sensitive information about them. It's just generated string. It's not, there's nothing insecure about it itself. So like if someone random found that string logged in the console or something, unless your security rules aren't very good, there's nothing harmful about that. But when you write good security rules, which is a way to secure your Firebase systems, you can say like, hey, if the currently logged in user is trying to access data that at this data location with this UID, if they match, that's cool. You can let them do that. Otherwise, you know, this read or update will not be allowed because, you know, they're obviously they don't belong here.
I was trying to think, like, when I think about Firebase and do I want to use it, I was kind of have to remind myself of all the things that come along with it. It's not just the database side, right? Or just the database bit off, but all these other features are things that we can utilize Firebase for, right?
Right. Yeah. And they're all totally piecemeal, like standalone stuff. Like it's not else. Like we have two databases. It's very unlikely you'll need both. Or, you know, in general, like having two different databases, especially client, you know, connected database, it's not very common. So like you might just need database and authentication. That's cool. Also, we just have a hosting service. Maybe you just want to throw your app up on, which is something we actually, another new thing we did is, and this is something I'm very out of the loop on. So like the people who worked on this, they'll have to forgive me if I butcher it. If you call...
James is listening in the chat, so be careful.
There we go. See, James is the one. He showed me this.
You're busted like, if you mess this up.
Just like at James in the chat. Like.
Yeah, and James Daniels, by the way, so people in the chat, James Daniels is like the AngularFire person right now. I'm just like the smiling spokesperson at this point. Like I used to be the AngularFire person. I'm not that anymore. James is that person now. I met with James before this and I was like, hey, what's new?
So I should say, what has James done for us lately, right?
This is truly the case. So I even was like, you want to come on? And he was like, no, you go do it. Because I would have been like, is that right, James?
We have a lot of love for AngularFire in the chat, so it's a good thing he's there. I just told him, everybody give your love to James.
Yeah, no, James. I think he's James Uriah on Twitter. You have to go follow him. James is awesome. He is the amount of behind the scenes work too he's done that will go completely underappreciated. Like that this is probably for a whole other AngularAir, but the work that had to be done to get Firebase being zone aware in a way that didn't like mess up your app was very intensive. And the funny thing about it is we didn't know it was going to be intensive before. It was server-side rendering that really like opened our eyes up to the amount of work we had to do with zones. And James and I had this very friendly like argument about who was going to get to add server-side rendering support. And I really wanted to do it. I was like really interested in server-side rendering, but so was he. And then I was like, you know what? Fine. I was like, I'll acquiesce. James, you can have it. And then like months later, watching him go through it, it was literally like, I was like, did you hear that? And he's like, what? And I was like, that was the sound of a bullet just going right by my head. I just dodged that because it was
like whitewashing Tom Sawyer's fence right there.
I mean, it's a really weird thing to fight for, David. Like,
it was also
anytime he needs appreciation, he should come here because there's a lot of appreciation. Apparently, our audience really loves Firebase. I mean, we love Firebase, so everybody loves Firebase.
It was the very early days though for Angular Universal. Like we were blazing a trail, so there was a lot of just like, you know, Angular team was working deeply with us on it, and they were learning a lot because Angular Universal was still like early beta, and so we were learning quite a bit, and it was a very interesting world. Since you know James blazed that trail pretty well, but yeah, you should have him on sometime to talk about zones and just the amount of. He knows a lot about that internal part of Angular. It's very interesting. Well, if you're into that kind of thing, it's very interesting.
I am making a note. I'm going to read James. We're coming to talk to you, so just be ready for that. Hey, David, we have a lot of love in the chat for Angular, obviously, or for AngularFire, but we also have a couple questions. Do we have time for a couple questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Rares wants to know when he cracks me up. When he's using Firebase, it's really simple to abuse some of the features that it has, DB, A/B testing, and stuff like that. What would you do to prevent your team making a gigantic bill to the customer? And I'm laughing because I'm thinking of like the kids running up the like buying apps online. Like, how do you stop your team from running up the bill, David? Is that a feature for?
There's a lot of different ways of doing that. The first and very easy thing to do. So actually, I run a lot of demos on on my personal account, and I will, and a lot of things I have to enable billing for, and we have like a big billing tier. But once you go over, you start getting charged. So I have like my own personal credit cards and stuff tied to lots of projects. So I'm like, I don't want a big bill. And so, and a lot of the times you'll do something and, incidental, and, the numbers will start running up. And so there's ways to like prevent that. The first and easiest thing you can do is just set a budget alert where it will warn you for like very several thresholds beforehand. So like, let's say you have a budget of like $20, you can set alerts to be like, hey, alert me when there's like any money that's about to come in. And so it does like predictive forecasting of like, at this rate, your bill's going to be $5 tomorrow or something, so they'll do predictive forecasting of your bill, but it'll also do actual forecast, actual like, hey, no, it is this right now. So you can get two different types of alerts, and that's very useful because then you can see like, oh, something's going on, either fix the thing or turn it off, or, whatever the fix ends up being. So budget alerts is the easiest. It's all done in UI. It's very easy to do. So budget alerts, first and foremost. The second thing you do is you got to look at so this is kind of a very vague one, but like you have to look at like what product it is. So let's say you're using hosting, and hosting has like total like storage is like a cost that can happen. And so, well, what can cause your site to be really big? Like one thing can cause site to be really big is if you're publishing like videos and stuff like that. So you kind of look to see like, oh, maybe I can put these off on YouTube for free, or maybe, which should probably be a better player anyways. But we also have, cloud storage, which has the same billing rates, but it has different versioning policies. So you don't have to worry about publishing two versions of your site and having like two videos taking up your storage costs. And so also you can manage your versions. You can say like, hey, I only ever want to keep like 3 versions at a time. So that way it's not going to be racking up your storage costs. And so you really look at like what the price points are, and then you kind of build in these safeguards. We have lots of systems in place that say like, hey, don't let this happen. So like with Firestore, if you're worried about people doing a lot of reads or writes, you can write security rules that limit those type of things, or you can write Cloud Functions that rate limit. And Cloud Functions themselves, you get millions of invocations for free. But even when you go beyond that, you can, if it's a get, you can cache Cloud Functions invocations through Firebase hosting. So it doesn't actually go out to the Cloud Functions instance. It goes out to the CDN that the content at the last invocated result is stored on the CDN. And so you can say like, hey, every time this Cloud Function is called, store the result on a CDN for however you have total flexibility for like a day or something. And then that way that cost is very nominal, well within most free tiers. But the Cloud Function invocation won't happen for another day. So there's tons of different ways to do that. So budget alerts first and foremost. Second thing, look at what the actual price point is that you're afraid of. Like, oh, what if we get too many writes? What if I get too many, this? And figure out like how are the ways to mitigate those costs? Because it's usually fairly straightforward when you focus on the actual part of the bill that you're afraid of.
I have another recommendation on that question that is unauthorized. I do not speak for the Firebase team, but I will say I've known these guys a long time. And the first time I ever talked to David East, he didn't know me. I was nobody, right? Nobody knew who I was. And he was really nice. And
I remember meeting you at NVConf.
Yeah. I was so excited to meet you, but I've had a pretty consistent experience with all of the people that I've, Abe and James, like you talk to these people and they're just really nice people consistently. And I know I actually had a friend very early in the days of Firebase who put a memory leak. He wrote a memory leak into his own program and just like wrote up this whole big bill and reached out to the Firebase team and was like, hey, they reached out to customer service or however did it. And just, I've just always had such pleasant, nice experiences. And so I would really encourage you to reach out and ask questions too, because there's such nice people consistently, not just David, all of them. And there's another question too, David, from Sarun. There was something about a memory leak issue on server environment. Do you have any update about that yet? Have you heard about that?
Yeah, I actually, this is one of those ones where I wish James is on, and I'd be like, "Why, yes, I do, James. Please inform us." I do know. Yeah, actually, so to one of the new things that's coming to AngularFire, or actually it's there. I think it's there now. James was showing me this like this morning. It was pretty amazing, and I know this was in the works for a while, but it's a very complicated thing. Is that so if you do, and you're probably familiar with like the new ng deploy schematics that have come out. So Firebase hosting is one of the ng deploy ones, but Firebase hosting all in itself is a static hosting provider. So HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and that all gets like cached into a CDN upon request. And so it's like really fast, but it's not like you deploy like a PHP file or something and we run that back. But we do have integrations with serverless providers like Cloud Functions and Cloud Run. And so for Cloud Functions, you write a bit of Node.js code, and then, every time something happens, that method gets triggered. And there's tons of events, like every time a user creates a new account, every time a document is created, stuff like that. But we also do just, vanilla HTTP requests. And Firebase hosting integrates with that. So if you try to visit a certain route and you've marked it in your configuration as like a dynamic route, we will go call out to the Cloud Function, generate that content, and then send it back. And then you also can cache that in the CDN. And that's just like a cache control header. And so theoretically, you can do Angular Universal on that. And so Angular Universal, though, can be kind of tough to set up at times, especially depending on your setup and what libraries and stuff you're using. So we made it very easy with AngularFire to do it. So you do ng deploy, and then you put in some flags, and then we'll actually create a universal build and deploy that out onto Cloud Functions for you. So you sort of get like this automatic like universal site through the command, and you're not on hook for making sure you understand each one of those configuration pieces and every single spot it gets deployed to. And as far as the memory leak goes, I know James has been fixing stuff like crazy, so there's a very good chance that that happens. And a lot of that is due to the Zone.js stuff, where Zone is not aware that something is finished, and we need to tell Zone that it's finished. And then it's kind of like making sure you have like buttoned up every single. It's like a watertight seal, actually. And so like you're kind of like, okay, like I have to make sure this is completely sealed, and Zone knows that. And then if you miss like one spot, it just sort of starts leaking out, and then you're like, oh, what spot is it? And all you see is the puddle, but you don't actually see like the microscopic hole that it's coming out of.
So you mentioned already about both zones and universal. Any other compatibility things that you want to point out? Maybe latest versions of Angular that are supported? I know.
No, we've gotten things up and working on Ivy. Really, the biggest since Firebase is very asynchronous, and it's asynchronous too in terms of like there's lots of background timers, that stuff you'll never see or be aware of, that the SDKs do, like all the Firebase libraries do quite a bit of work. Like when you use Firestore, for example, a lot of people, I get this question a lot, and it's because it's a very, and it's a great question, because it shows that you're aware of like bandwidth or just latency problems. So like people are like, hey, if I keep calling this method, am I going to keep requesting this data over the server every time I call it? And it's, because if you wrote your own REST wrapper around a server you did every time you would call fetch or whatever, XHR request or Angular HTTP, it would make that request out to the server, and you wouldn't want to always be doing that. And so I tell them like, no, you don't have to worry about that. The user are never responsible for making, or never directly responsible for making a network request. Like the way that the Firestore SDK is written is that behind the scenes, you have this whole API that creates a connection out to this backend, this persistent one, and then it knows what subscriptions you have placed, and then it makes these delta changes. So every time a new update has happened remotely, whether you made that change yourself or like someone, way across the world made that change, that delta of the change comes down to the client, and then it gets applied to this local cache, and then the developer themselves only ever reads from the cache. And so they aren't responsible for like making sure that the network updates are like perfect and great and everything. Like that all automatically happens behind the scenes. And even when you make an event, that actually locally fires first. And that's called latency compensation. So it happens really quick. And so it happens on the client before it's even been confirmed on the server. And there's like other background work to make sure that that confirmation is valid. And if it's not valid, it gets rolled out. That all sounds very complicated because it is. That's like code I look at and I'm like, this is me like in several conversations with engineers who are like, this is how it works. And I'm like, so there's a cache, and they're like, oh, okay, let's do this again. All right. So it starts this way. And so after like the 15th or 16th meeting, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. So basically you have all these background timers and you have all these asynchronous events, and Zones wants to be like, oh, I see. Every time one of these background timers happens, you want to re-render. And you're like, no, actually I don't. And they're like, oh, okay. But for that one you do, right? And you're like, oh, not that one either. And it's like, oh, okay. But for this one over here, and you're like, no, not that one either. And so you have to like find all of them or create a system, which James has done, which is really, that was the first thing we did. We tried to patch every single hole in the dam. And then James came up with a just brilliant system for, making a new dam, basically.
I'm really starting to like this James guy, I got to tell you.
Yeah, no, he's done amazing work. And so that's the thing. And Zones on the server too was also the problem too, is when, because there's node zone, and that's important. So if you're using like Angular HTTP, and Angular HTTP has a whole system actually for knowing when these requests are done for node zone. And so we had to basically create a process like that where we would come into James would run into these scenarios where the HTML, you'd go to render the server-side rendered HTML, and it would just be like an empty document because we didn't get the data back in time, but we thought it was time to render. And then you would have times where it would just never render, it'd block forever because it didn't know, it would just be that continuous connection. So it'd be like waiting and waiting and waiting. And so James had to basically figure out how do I know exactly when something's done, and now I can render this page and get that initial, document back. So that's usually the integration problems. Usually stuff like IV, any like, I mean,
is that all?
Yeah, I mean that's about, I'd say like 90% of integration, things we have to think about are all within Zone.
I think we're almost out of time, but I think
I know.
I think Justin and Mike, I saw.
Yeah, a couple more questions. But that's again, going back to that, like that's why we use AngularFire, right? Because then we as developers don't need to worry about all of that integration part. It's taken care of, right?
Yes,
Daniels has to worry about that.
That's like the conference talk I don't give to like show off AngularFire. Like that was not in my ngconf talk. A lot of people would be like, so how do I log a user?
So you mentioned some integrations with schematics. I'm going to cut you off real quick, Justin, just to finish this one last question. Is schematics, are there schematics for potentially, or for AngularFire specifically, either for setup, update, or real-time generation or code generation?
There's all of those. I'm not a big user of those because I do everything manually, but like I've seen how nice it's been lately because I've seen other people do it, and I'm like, oh, that's really fast. I'm like, I should probably start doing that. I'm like the person who won't upgrade like their, like I'm on like Chrome 67. No, I'm not on Chrome 67, but like, I like don't upgrade anything until like I'm very stubborn in that.
Wait, is that because you still have a gazillion tabs open in the Chrome and you don't want to shut it down, or did you move past that?
No, so that's the opposite way of thinking. You never have to worry about updating when you only have a small amount of tabs open. So I only ever have my New Year's resolution was to have less than 7 tabs open at one period of time.
I don't understand.
That's a whole nother podcast too to talk about that.
I just couldn't do it. I'm impressed.
There's a whole philosophical reason, because every tab that's open is like a to-do. It's like a task you're supposed to do. And then it's an unorganized way of having tasks. And so now I have a whole task system in play that makes me be able to let go of the tab.
Scheduling you for another podcast right now.
I actually kind of do want to hear that. Yeah.
I have one question on that.
Yes.
Email and calendar, do those count towards the 7?
Those do count towards the 7.
Oh, okay. I'm at 8.
You're killing me.
But yeah, so we have the schematics for the ng add, and that'll set up like a lot of the code generation for like getting AngularFire set up into your app. And then the ng deploy will do code generation. Some of that's pretty easy. It's just sort of configuration generation. But the one for Cloud Functions does do a fair amount of code generation, getting your universal bundle and making sure that it's going out to your actual, because that deploys code out to actually different surfaces. Like you go out to a Cloud Function, which is separate than Firebase hosting. And so it makes sure everything goes out to the right spots, and it makes sure that the functions are connected to hosting. There's lots of really cool stuff it does. It, abstracts over some of the just glue stuff that I don't believe anyone should be responsible for. Yet I still manage to do it every day myself.
Nice.
Except James should be responsible.
Yeah, James is responsible for that. That's right.
Okay, I've got 2 quick questions before we wrap up. One, in the new AngularFire, is there anything that it doesn't, what doesn't it support right now in terms of Firebase services?
It's a good question. I don't think we have any, outside of maybe like a feature of a product. I don't believe there's a single web product we do not support. There might be like some new API method or something that we're like, we could stand to like, add some support for. But I don't believe, there's anything major that we haven't gotten support for.
Awesome. And then I know I don't recall what version we were on the last time we talked. So there may be several versions, but during that time, has there been any breaking changes or API changes that we need to think about in terms of if we need to upgrade AngularFire, or has it been pretty stable?
We had a really big API change back when Firestore came out, because we changed the way the old real-time database API used to work. And so they work. So the Firestore API and the real-time database API, while they're different APIs, have very similar APIs to them. So like switching back and forth between the two is easy. That was a really big one. We've had very subtle, smaller breaking changes, but we haven't had anything very big. And we just released a 6.0, and there were a handful in there, but most of them are very easy to fix, and they're only like if you're doing specific things. But there hasn't been like a huge, like we renamed this method to this thing and that thing to that thing.
Cool. All right. Well, we're at the top of the hour, covered a lot of stuff, so I think we're probably good on that. Let's see if we have any picks, and then we'll call it a show. So first, I like to call the panelists first. So any panelists, if you have any picks, go raise your hand. I'll call on you. All right, Bonnie's first. Bonnie, what do you got?
James Daniel. I got to tell you, every once in a while, I have to have a pick as a person. I mean, he seems to be the man of the hour tonight. Other than, obviously, we knew David East was the man of the hour, but we have a...
No, just the puppet.
Nice. All right,
I'm just over here. I'm like...
All right. I have a pick, and it's David East's shirt.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that's...
Can I see the shirt, please?
Oh, yeah.
Space Invaders, right?
From Angular Denver.
Twist on it?
What got what?
What are the shields
It's
down
got
there?
the Angular logos.
It's Angular.
All right.
This is the Angular Denver shirt from the year before last, I think. From the summer.
Okay.
Wasn't it from
So
the summer,
Space
David?
Invaders, right? Space Invaders game with Angular shields as the shields down below to protect your ship. But I gotta say, I'm stressing out because those alien ships are getting really close. I just want to be mashing my Atari button so hard right now because it's stressing me out. I don't know. I think the Space Invaders are going to win on that shirt.
They should have skipped a couple lines so you could be less stressed.
They just got upgrade to Ivy and it's done.
I heard something interesting about Space Invaders in the last week. So I'll add to your pick that initially when the game was developed, the spaceships coming down were not supposed to speed up as there were less and less. But because they were programmed for a specific processor, since there were less of them that need to be rendered, they started to speed up, and that actually became part of the game.
That's like some Jaws level lore right there. Like the shark didn't work. So,
That's a good little trivia there, Mike.
Nice. I like it.
Read that this past week. Whether or not the validity of it or not, I'm not positive.
Oh,
But
I love you, Mike.
that's really good.
All right, Alyssa, I think you have a pick as well.
Yeah, twitch.tv/codeit live. They're streaming quite often, but I did some recap streams each day after ngconf, their TLDR ngconf streams for session highlights and surprise guests, yada yada. So check those out if you happen to miss the conference or part of it. So
I do have a quick pick. I know we just boiled over 1 hour, but I'm going to do it anyways. So and Alyssa, we should team up. I have started streaming, and so I'm rebuilding my whole ngconf talk on. Right now, I'm doing it every Monday. We'll see how that holds up. But every once a week, I am just going on Twitch and I'm just rebuilding, and it's a hoot. Everyone just talking in the chat, having fun.
Is that a hoot?
And I've been doing tons of live streaming lately. It's been lots of fun. So I don't have like one of those channels on YouTube where I can like link to. I haven't like hit all those requirements yet. So at _David East on Twitter, and then find that tweet where I talk about that thing, and then click on that. So
You'll get there in no time. You're going to be there soon.
Yeah. It's a really good conversion tactic, getting people to click on as many different sites and links as possible to sign up. It's an ABC test.
Well, and hopefully you've got some AngularFire going in the background there to track all that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, really appreciate you coming back on, David. Always a pleasure to have you on, and we really appreciate you sharing your time and your knowledge with us, as well as entertaining us and taking us down these journeys. Thank you.
Thank you all for having me.
For sure. All right, that's a wrap, everyone.
Thank you for
Have a
the
good
chat
one
tonight. We had a really great chat tonight.
See you next time.
Bye bye.